right, Psalm 107, let's call this one Red Flags and subtitle it Joy in this psalm. We've actually preached already, but to avoid repeating some of the same things we talked about, let's just summarize it the way we summarized it in the sermon and move on, understanding that this is a psalm that over and over, like the psalms around it, encourages God's people to be grateful for the things that he has done, because it's going to describe times in life, specifically through the lens of Israel, when they just decided that the things they saw God counseling them to do were ridiculous. So they were going to go their own way, and they ended up ensnared to either the people around them or to difficult circumstances of life in general. And in those times when God forgave them after they had basically snubbed the good advice that he was giving them, it says, give thanks to the Lord for the way that he forgave you and overlooked the way you got yourself into your own mess. There are times, however, when we are simply fooled. We think we are doing the right thing, but we end up just as ensnared as we might have been in times that we knew we were rejecting good advice and simply got caught up in the consequences of that. In times when we are more innocent, but end up just as caught up in the results of our folly. When God forgives us, he's going to say, give thanks to the Lord for that next opportunity he has given you. But between or around those two circumstances, when we get ourselves in our own mess, he's going to start out that section where he talks about the ways in which we can become ensnared in life drama by saying sometimes we simply find it difficult to find a place to fit in, not even when we're doing wrong, but just because life is not easy and it's not always easy to find our fit. And in times when I'm seeing more and more articles about different groups of people that used to possibly find community with one another, but individuals within those groups feeling more and more isolated, this old bit of wisdom from the psalmist seems to matter as much as ever. Understanding that he's going to go on toward the end of that section of describing the ways in which we should give thanks for the way in which, like we said in that first instance, we should give thanks when God helps us find community when we were struggling to find it on our own. He says give thanks to the Lord just as much as we might need to give thanks in times when he has gotten us out of messes of our own creation. But then there are times, likewise, when we are not doing wrong. And much like we find it difficult to find community, we can find that in actually doing legitimate business or going about our business in a legitimate way, we simply find ourselves in traps we haven't seen, or life circumstances. Sometimes the insurance companies will call them acts of God that cause us misery that have nothing to do with anything we've done wrong. And so he says in times when God bails us out of those life circumstances, we should likewise thank the Lord. And so that theme of giving thanks to God or showing gratitude to God seems to manifest itself in 4 life circumstances that ultimately point us to understanding that one of the additional reasons we need to give thanks to God is no matter what circumstance we find ourselves in, whether we are wealthy, prosperous, and happy, or poor and destitute, that God can change that situation. Because if we mishandle the good things that God has allowed us to experience, then it takes nothing for him to take those things away. However, if we are diligent in handling hard times with integrity, it takes nothing for him to turn those hard times into better opportunities and better days. And so what he says is, allow the wise person at the end of the psalm to consider all of these things and deciding the way you're going to respond to your circumstances, whether you have a lot or a little. But before he gets to that conclusion where he says the wise will ponder the steadfast love of the Lord, as he calls it, I have a hard time saying it, steadfast love of the Lord, is he is going to say that the upright rejoice when they see those who have been suffering through no fault of their own. A red flag for the upright is their attitude toward those who are bailed out of their tough times. Those who, for lack of a better term, cheer for the underdog, especially a just underdog in any situation, not just underdogs that they can identify with. He says that's a red flag actually for integrity and maybe even more maturity in our relationship with God. And so as we sometimes say, God's best to you as you go forward in him, God willing, growing beyond the ability to merely cheer for the underdogs that we like and growing into the ability to cheer for every underdog that God has chosen to bring out of tough times.